Amen. All right, I've got, I think, a very interesting Bible topic that we will end with. So we'll get there. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time in some news, but we will cover some interesting stuff. The largest galaxy ever discovered baffles scientists. It is, look at this. Astronomers just found the largest galaxy ever discovered. Notice they didn't say ever because they don't know what's out there. And they have no idea how it got so big. Right. At 16.3 million light years wide, I'll let you say that word, Alcyonius galaxy has a diameter of 160 times wider than our Milky Way and 4 times that of the previous title holder, IC 1101, which spans 3.9. So this is huge. Named after one of the mythical giants. Named after a mythical giant. Why don't they name something after one of the angels or give it some kind of Jesus' creation name, some kind. Come up with something different. But now they got to go for these Greek and Roman gods, and it's just strange. I'll let you have the rest of that. So the solar, remember the solar minimum has hit its minimum, and we're headed upwards. We're headed to the solar max, which takes several years. And already they're having some pretty significant sun activity. A very, very large sunburst happened on the other side of the planet. And it did cause some electrical issues, not much, but it was directed away from us. The earthquakes, minor, really not a whole lot this last week, which again, I put this up here because I want to show you, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Anybody hear those last week or so? But see to it that you are not alarmed. So nobody get alarmed. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see indiscriminate bombing, what Russia's done is they use Grad rockets, they use, tanks, they just fire at will, I feel sorry for Will. Everybody's always firing at him. They just fire at will, but now, did you see the last couple of days, they're using more cruise missiles, and they took out a major airport. So the cruise missiles are smart. They know where they're going. They hit their target. Whereas the other work, they just fire at a town or fire at a section of town and hit anything that's going to hit. The Russians have sent in the Chechens. I don't know if you've been following Amir and some others on that, but Chechen rebels are in there. They set one team to assassinate Zelensky. That's been tried 3 times. It's been put down. But there's other rebels, and now there's a lot more. We'll get to Russia here in a few minutes. So that's the wars and rumors of wars. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. The end is still to come. So we need to be in this for the long haul. Hopefully we're out of here sooner than we thought, but we need to be in it in our minds and hearts for the long haul. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are the beginning of birth pains. The beginning. So there's a ramp up. I showed you this before. This is not mine. This is the watchers there. And there's the global conflicts. Back to 1400, see all the little ones? And then the big ones start up, and then the really big ones. And in the last few years, I don't know, half a century, it's gone way down. But look at all the little dots toward that end. Those are all civil wars over in here. Lots and lots and lots of civil wars happening on the planet today. And I've mentioned that, but these become what Jesus is saying, bigger wars. Remember, the first thing he tells us is not to be deceived. And I got into a discussion with a couple times in the last couple of weeks about this kind of an idea. Are there people out there claiming to be the Messiah all the time? Here's 3 I just pulled up right now. So And they're, in India and some other places as well as the United States. Migrants desecrate more than 2,000 churches just in Greece. So in the last 5 to 10 years, since this migrant crisis, they're decimating churches. There appears to be a correlation between the increase in illegal migration and the incident of attacks on Greek Orthodox religious churches. Now that took a rocket scientist to figure that one out. That's not rocket science. That's exactly what they invited into their homes. I invite everyone, here's the Pope, I invite everyone to make this coming 2nd of March, Ash Wednesday, a day of fasting for peace. I like that idea. Let believers dedicate themselves intensely to praying and fasting. May the Queen of Peace preserve the world from the madness of war. Okay, who's that? Well, it only has to be Mary.
Yeah.
But remember, Jeremiah talks about the Queen of Heaven, and they use that terminology as well. This is very, very concerning terminology and a request, and this guy's supposed to be standing in the place of Christ and the vicar in place of. This is very, very concerning because he's calling, this is part of our problem, by the way. We wonder why we have almost a world war now. This is part of the problem. Joe and I were talking about this the other day a little bit. Zuckerberg recently said, a lot of people think that the metaverse is about a place. But an added dimension is that it's about time. Definition, thank you. Basically, immersive digital worlds become the primary way that we live our lives and spend our time. Now, are they going to go there? Whether they're going there, that's why they changed their name to Meta. They're going to use AI and other stuff to make this happen. But why would they be doing this? And there's all kinds of theories out there. Some of them are already in place. But this is really basically to make the masses happy while they march along in your, their step, the step that they want you to go in. They want you to walk a certain way. They're going to make you happy doing it. Remember what one of the EU, I think it was the Secretary of the EU said, was the secretary, one of those, Klaus Schwab, I think is what it was. He said, nobody's going to own property and you're going to like it. And so this is the kind of mentality, think about this. In the Old Testament, I looked this up one time, and I can't remember how many times it was there, but several times, like in Ezekiel and Isaiah, that the Lord promises everybody a place under their own what? Fig tree. He offers them land. He wants them to have a piece of land. He set borders and languages, of course, but he wants people to live in the land. In fact, one of the curses was, I'm going to chase you out of the land. So this is very demoralizing to human beings, if you ask me. Let's get into Russia here. This guy says, your words have less value than a hole in the New York pretzel. This is the ambassador to the UN from Ukraine, and he's talking to the Russian. He's saying, your words don't mean anything. And so the question is, did the world see this coming? Well, we know Mitt Romney saw it coming. Okay, did the world see this coming, and what could they have done about it? We could go over that all day long, but now we're in this place. Now, before we go forward, I want to throw this thing here out at you that, yes, we could have done something. Yes, there were some people doing some things. Who was the one person we know was doing some things? Was, past tense, President Trump. Well, why did he get taken off the stage? Because God took him off the stage. And that's where we have to come down, because that's what the Bible says about rulers. So for God to pull Gog down, He has to have certain things in place, certain people in place. He uses, remember the hand, he uses people in his hand. They actually are his hand, and they do his bidding, whether good or calamity is the word that I would rather use. Did we see this coming? Jeremiah 13:23, can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? Neither are you able to do good, you who are accustomed to doing evil. So this is the general state of mankind. This is who I say Putin has been. And now everybody, who's known Putin, now they're the heroes are coming out, and they're telling us he was KGB, what did you expect? He loved the Soviet Union, and on and on. On German TV, a German energy minister says Gazprom has worked toward, Gazprom is the state-owned gas company of Russia, has worked toward the current moment by systematically holding back gas deliveries to Europe and emptying its reservoirs in Germany at the start of the winter. And we brought this up a few months ago, that there were empty tanks in EU, and Russia was blaming it on them for not ordering and not using their supplies correctly and all this other stuff. So they took the lie. That was part of the lie. It continues. Here's some other stuff. Putin in 1999 did a series of apartment bombings. This actually rose him to basically stardom in Russia. He did this to say, hey, we have terrorists in our cities and in our state, and we have to take care of it. And so he rose to stardom, if you will, during that time. He's done a series of poisonings of the opposition, and a couple of those in London, in the UK.
It looks like Putin rose out of a Civil War background then.
He was KGB.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's been in their government for decades, and he rose up behind the president there. And I want to say, it wasn't Gorbachev. It was the guy who was an alcoholic. I hate to say his name, but anyway, and they just worked that other guy out and got him in. And he used barrel bombs and chemical weapons in Syria. We know that. That's the red line thing. And then we know he's bombed hospitals and lots of indiscriminate bombing in Syria. So that's in Syria. But on Ukraine, the idea of Ukraine, he lied to his soldiers about he's going into exercises. They were actually going to war. Troops were sent with low fuel and food rations. That's why some of those convoys were stalled. Some of them just given up. He's closing down all the negative media and the hospitals, indiscriminate bombing there with children and other things in Ukraine as well. So he's doing the same thing that he's done in Syria and other places. So is there a change? Okay, a leopard doesn't change its spots. Was there a change? Finland's president sees a change in Putin. It was a different kind of behavior. And how many people now have we heard say that? I was watching Fox, 4 or 5 days ago, and they were going through several people who knew him and said, he's changed. Everybody said, he's changed. Well, maybe his behavior has changed. But not his character and not his heart. But I'm going to say this as well. Again, in Ezekiel 38, it says that a thought comes to his mind and he prepares a scheme or a plan. So, I'm not saying that he isn't demonically possessed, because he could be now. There could be a change because of that issue. But we know he is basically out of his mind. Nanisto, who has been in close contact with Putin, recalled an exchange the two shared on the phone during one of the regular calls. Nanisto said he pushed back against Putin by standing up for his country's sovereignty. That is when Putin switched tones, he said, then began to officially read his list of demands. That was a change in his behavior, and I want to guess, and from that, I guess that he wants to be very decisive. He wants to sound like one. It was a different kind of behavior. Now, what's happening on the back of that is the West is standing up. And I'm not sure if I have this one I think I have this one out. order here, but the U.S. troops are now spotted in Romania, which is a NATO country, and at the border of Moldova, which is not a NATO country. And in fact, you saw the president of Belarus give away land, and one of the arrows from the Black Sea went right into Moldova. So the Moldova president called them and said, hey, what do you think you're doing? And all this other stuff. But I've said, I said it a couple, 3 weeks ago, I think that he's after Moldova because he's not NATO and because that backs Romania and the United States up against the Carpathian Mountains. And so I think if he has a chance, he'll take Moldova. It's interesting, he's already got a section there with quite a few Russians, and it's, when you see a map, it's colored pink or whatever, not like Moldova is, just like the Donetsk and Luhansk area in Ukraine. So it's it's an occupied territory, really, basically, is what it is now. A Russian envoy at the UNSC says Moscow does not recognize Israeli sovereignty on the Golan Heights. So the issue with Israel and Russia now continue to ramp up, or to continue to be in a negative tone. And you can see this going along here. The only country that recognizes Israel's Golan sovereignty is the U.S., only because Trump was there. So again, the timing is Trump recognized everything, and then we're going to switch it out. So now it is like God saying, wait a minute, God, you could have picked a different timing for Trump to come up and recognize that. When we settle Putin down and we do all this other stuff, we could do that good stuff for Israel later. No, I want it now. Why now? Because it brings the rest of the world against Israel. It brings them against Israel. Everybody hates the Golan Heights idea, the settlements issue. And so, now again, Trump wants peace, and that's his primary emphasis is peace. But God doesn't want peace. He wants peace in our hearts, but he doesn't want peace there. And just read Zechariah, where he remember the horsemen go out to the earth, and they come back, and he says, what'd you find? And they say, peace. Everybody's at peace. And the anger of the Lord got stirred. Because why aren't you clamoring for the kingdom? Why aren't you doing something for me? Because when we're doing something for him, people are going to be mad. So when you give Israel, the people of God, their Golan Heights, more property, more power, more money, that stirs not only the devil, but it stirs the enemies of God as well. And to be frank, it stirs some of the church as well. And I'm concerned about that section of the church. The U.S. GDP, here's an example or comparison. The U.S. GDP, gross domestic product, is $21 trillion. And Russia's is 1.5. Russia trails much smaller countries such as the UK, Italy, and France. The Russian government controls all of the energy imports and exports in this country, and the media and a bunch of other stuff. As of 2020, Russia is the third largest oil producer behind the US and Saudi Arabia. Well, why don't we have our own gas then? I'll show you. As of 2020, Russia's the third. The largest political party in Russia was founded by Putin. On February 22nd, 2022, their Duma passed a resolution giving Putin complete and perpetual military control, including invasion of foreign territory. Carte blanche. So now, this is production. This is production in 2020 or 2021, I can't remember. That's where it sits now. But guess how much the United States consumes? 28 million. So we use all of ours, and then we gotta use everybody else's, or somebody else's.
It's almost twice as much as this next one under it.
Yeah, the United States is way ahead. But and by the way, I think that's less. That could be less now because That was in the Trump era, of course, and we became the #1 exporter of gas and liquid gas there during that time. But the United States, I should have put that other one up here, but the United States, China is second in the use in consuming. And we use, I don't think it's twice that, I think we use just more than that, like 20 or 22 maybe. But I know that we use more than we consume. I mean, we export or drill. And China was next, and they had half of what we use. So what would it be if the United States we couldn't drive all our cars and we couldn't, do all the things that we do? How many people are playing on the lake in boats in the United States in the middle of July? It's crazy. So that's what's happening here. Turkey's Erdogan says it cannot abandon ties with Russia or Ukraine. And about a week ago, Ukraine asked Turkey to close the Black Sea access to Russian ships. And they have a treaty to do that. When there's a war, the Turks can shut down and should shut down the Bosphorus, okay? So they finally did that. But two things happened. One, they waited a week. And two, there was already some indication that Russia had been communicating with them saying, we need the Bosphorus during this time. Don't shut us down. We're going to be coming up. All these kind of things. So Russia got their ships through the Black Sea when they needed to. And remember, there's some of those ships that weren't supposed to go through the Bosphorus, but they said, well, during a time of mechanical, issues where we're fixing it, we need to bring it back. They use ploys like that. So it's called shenanigans. That's what's happening. The first country to recognize the Donetsk and Luhansk is Syria. And, Assad saying, well, we don't want to upset Putin because now he's invading the world. Now, I just want to show you these pictures. While Ukraine is a complete disaster now, look at Iraq. This is Iraq. So that's a huge problem, right? I don't think anybody can argue that map. This is today's maps. This is Syria. Still a huge problem. People dying on the Israeli border, right there, and on the Jordan border, right there. Remember, I want to remind you that Dara was the place where this civil war started, and now the government troops have taken it over, and there's still some rebels there. The blue, of course, is the United States up there, and to the right, that's a Turkish UAV, but the United States is working up there quite heavily, and the Turks are and the Russians are getting upset at us constantly. Out from this airplane right here is out from Latakia Air Base, Syria, on a Russian Air Force call sign headed into Turkish airspace. This has been going over and over and over. Remember, over Turkish airspace. They're taking Syrian fighters to Ukraine. So now you have Chechens and Syrians now in Ukraine. And by the way, the Russians have hired, we've talked about this, they have the Wagner Group, which is a private security team run by the state, and they're in Ukraine as well. A Russian diplomat, U.S. military presence in Syria is neither mandated by the UN nor at Damascus requests. So now they're continuing to pick a fight, and they want us out of Syria. The U.S. presence on the eastern bank of the Euphrates River and in the southern Al-Tanf region is not legitimate. It has neither been authorized by the UN Security Council, nor has been demanded by the Syrian authorities. Now stop here for a second. These are the Russians talking. Did Lizinski ask him to come into Ukraine? You see, who asked him to come in? He's saying that the two regions on the eastern side, the Donetsk and Luhansk, asked him to come in. And yet we know that he had plans even before that to invade all of Ukraine. So they are hypocrites here. What does it matter? We all know this. What does it matter? Because nobody's going to stop him. Well, not nobody. There will be one. The senior Russian diplomat that questioned the American strategy in Syria. If the U.S. sides claimed that the sole purpose of their presence in Syria is to fight terrorism, then I would like to know how much longer such a campaign would continue and what the tangible outcome is. He underlined the strategic importance of areas on the eastern bank of the Euphrates River. Isn't that interesting that that's in the Bible, that's in prophecy, that's coming. There are food crops and crude oil there. Stop. They're burning food crops. They're burning the Kurdish food crops, and anybody that fights against them, they set fire to their fields. If the Damascus government were in control of the territory, the socio-economic situation in the country would be much, I would say, worse. Let me change his word. He said better, I said worse. Meanwhile, the United States has dispatched truckloads of military and logistical equipment to Syria's northeast as Washington is seeking to strengthen its foothold in the war-ravaged Arab country and further plunder its national resources. That's according to Russia. So, and we're putting it, we still have a decent footprint there and are arming the Kurds and keeping Russia at bay while Russia builds bridges along the Euphrates and is making headway slowly but surely. So here's Putin. The deployment of intelligence assets on the territory of Ukraine will allow them to control our territory up to the Urals. Now, so I have a map here, and here's the Carpathians again. There's a little stretch of Romania there, and then you've got Moldova, which I think he'll take. And so he's saying that clear over to Poland, this line here, and all the way over to the Ural Mountains, which come right down the center of Russia there, that's what he was concerned about. That's what he's saying. So we're going to back them up. They've basically taken Belarus without a shot. Now they're a puppet state. And now they're taking Ukraine, and they're going to move that line, narrow it back down over to the Carpathians and up to the Baltic Sea there. So that's their idea.
The Ural Mountains, they separate Europe from Asia?
Well, that's what they say, theory. I mean, I think that's right. The Mongolians and all, the Asians are kind of that way. So that's the history that I remember. So in Ukraine itself, the Dnieper River, the red line there, is the big river in the center of Ukraine. The Dnieper River is a good barrier and initial target for Putin. Huge question, will he stop there? I wrote this a week and a half ago or a week ago. If Ukraine does not fight, he may. If Ukraine does fight, Putin most likely goes further. I believe the Carpathians, the green, there's the barrier, so there's a barrier, and there's a bigger barrier. Russia's historical natural wall against the West is his goal. That means his target. The target is Moldova. That's what I believe. He has no reason to stop at the Moldovan border. So that's just what I believe. Let's talk about Zelensky for a minute. Zelensky's becoming quite a hero. The Ukrainian President Zelensky is tied to Klaus Schwab, Justin Trudeau, and other global elites. After leaving his career as a comedian and entertainer and becoming Ukraine's president in April 19, Zelensky hailed Trudeau as one of those leaders who inspired him to join politics when he became Ukraine's president in 2019. Like Trudeau, Zelensky is an acolyte of Klaus Schwab, a World's Economic Forum, the globalist organization behind the now infamous Great Reset agenda, which tells the world that by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. So there he is, and I looked at, I try to fact check this stuff, and there he is up on the World Economic Forum. You can go read that for yourself. So the fallout, more fallout from this invasion, all right? One, which was kind of interesting, Elon Musk, the Starlink service is now active, and I think, did I show this once? That Elon Musk has fired up a bunch of his satellites. He's covering the whole planet with satellites, and that way you can have internet and cell service. It was supposed to be cheap, and I looked again this last week. It is not cheap. So I'll leave that up to you. But he's fired that up already for the Ukrainians. And I go back to something that Joe says every once in a while, that necessity is the mother of invention. So he saw necessity, and now that thing is up and running faster than it was going to be. The leaders of the world are using the following to change the world: climate change, the pandemic, racism, and war now war. You can add there, what they would say is, okay, famine is the results of climate change. Actually, they would say war is the result of climate change. You could add famine, you could add droughts. All of those things are subcategories of climate change. Again, I want to go back to when the earthquakes start, when they're going to say, let me fix those, because that's going to be out of their hands. These opportunities are coming, one after another, pulled into God's plan. They're being pulled into God's plan. He's drawing them in. And I read across this verse again because I was going through Isaiah real quick, where Gary was talking about the nets and the fishermen. God is hauling them in like fish. It's his plan, and he's carrying it out. Hungarian Prime Minister, a serious stress test is coming from the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. He cited the UN's Agenda 2030 campaign and charged that it is nothing less than global government by tyranny that enslaves all humanity. In the 1990s, the United Nations drafted Agenda 21, their so-called plan for defeating climate change. In 2015, it was rebranded by socialists into Agenda 2030. Neither had anything to do with global warming and everything to do with reshaping our world according to their global vision. So that's the Hungarian Prime Minister. Some people are kind of onto their plans. And some of these men are nationalists, and they come to power for a while, then they get stomped out, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens to this guy. Germany, so here's the ramifications of this war now. Germany ramps up war machine after Trump got on them for not paying their debt. And by the way, buying gas from Russia instead of the United States or somebody else. Now Germany is ramping up the war machine, and they've established a goal there. We are entering a new era, Schultz told Parliament, and that means that the world we now live in is not the one we knew before. Well, it sort of was. There was a false peace, and we really have dumb leaders. And we don't know that, well, first of all, we don't know the Bible, that God says what is coming. He has prophesied what is coming. But secondly, we're not good students of history. Again, I think only the Middle Easterners are the best historians. NATO chief Stoltenberg warns, we face the threat of conflict for years to come following Russia's action in Ukraine. Here's the chief of NATO saying it's for years to come. So now what do you think they're going to do? They're going to ramp up the war machine. And this is the setting. These will be the armies, I believe, these will be the armies for the Antichrist. He will take those armies over. Populations of other countries cry out for NATO membership for fear of falling into Russian hands. So Finland and others are saying we need in. Russia in particular, Russia has warned Finland. And Finland, and I think I mentioned this a week or two ago, Finland has been one of the very smart countries because they were neutral and they had a huge defense budget, and they've put it into their defense. They've got a really good defense. But this may drive them into NATO. And NATO will accept them very rapidly. The Polish president, I believe Ukraine is not the last item on Mr. Putin's menu. Like he's a hungry bear, yeah. We have to be ready and determined to uphold the sanctions, perhaps even for a decade or for 15 or 20 years, in order to see the real effects. Poland announced Thursday it would increase its own military spending to 3%. You see the ramifications? They're going to stand up in the face of this guy. Now, Putin has the nukes, and he can basically destroy the world, so could the United States. But aside from that, he can't take over those Western countries, especially if the United States is with them. He can't do it. He doesn't have the Navy. He definitely doesn't have the Navy to do it. And most of their tanks, a lot of their tanks are really old. Their ships are all diesel. You know, they're not blue water navies, but they've got a significant Navy. And they've got really good submarines, especially lately, nuclear submarines. So oil change ahead. Stop and get your oil change. Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil company, has discovered several new natural gas fields in various regions of Saudi Arabia. Now, that's interesting, because who is it that's in Ezekiel 38 that says, why are you coming down? You know, I don't think they're asking on behalf of Israel. In fact, I know they're not. They are concerned for themselves. Saudi Arabia, the Dedan and Sheba and the ships of Tarshish and the young lions, don't forget them, the young leaders of young lions, they are the ones that are saying, why are you coming down? Well, I think that he's going to choke or try to choke the West with oil. Because see, drive up the price. In fact, I think I've got something. I'll show you here in a second. I'll show you. I've had really good conversations with Ali here this last week, and so anyway, Graham's called to destroy the ruble, crush the Russian oil and gas sector in response to Putin aggression. Now, don't you think that number one, Putin knows this, he's thought of this, and number two, he has a plan for it. And if he doesn't, I believe he will. Here is the ruble versus this is oil, all right? Look at where it started. This is the ruble. The ruble started at about 75 when the war, just before the war, and then it's gone up to 122. You can see that it's 100 rubles is worth $1.04. So it's nothing. And then the oil, you can see it started way down here, 70, 80, and now it's up to $115 a barrel almost. So that's what's happening there. Now, again, like Ali was saying, if that oil goes up, you would think, well, he's got a lot of oil. His ruble should come down. But this is the world market saying, we're going to crush you. And that's what Graham's saying, and that's what so many are saying. The question is, what does he do about it? He mentioned, Ali, that they know some people personally who, in Russia, who had dollars in a bank. They went and tried to get it. Couldn't. That banks are closed, that the stock market hasn't been open since this happened, the Russian stock market. So how does he come out of this? The wheat is going to be a huge problem. Ukraine and Russia has a lot of wheat they export. What happens there? More famine and those kinds of things. Prices going up. Hang on to your pocketbook. See my. Hey Austin, go get, if you would, my cord to plug this in. How does he come out of this? What does he do? And I can only think of one way, and I've talked to Ali about this, and I just think that he was going to think, if I go take Saudi Arabia, and if I take the Eastern Mediterranean, you've got all the oil and gas you need. Everybody has to come to you. So that's just a thought. China, what is China doing? Really quick, this is the only one I have on them. TSMC alone was responsible for 24% of the world's semiconductor output in 2020. Now, Ali showed me this, and I knew that they were important, but I didn't know how important. This is the Taiwanese semiconductor facilities there in 2019, according to the company. When it comes to the most advanced chips used in the latest iPhones, supercomputers, and automobile AI, TSMC is responsible for 92% of production, while Samsung is responsible for the other 8%. Now, this is another interesting point that Ali said, that it takes about 10 years for them to ramp up a facility to build semiconductors. 10 years. And it just doesn't happen overnight. And so they're way behind the 8 ball on this. Now, I did mention here recently that Intel has decided to build a facility in Ohio. And so Intel's on it, but again, Intel is not even close to what TSMC now is. Now, Ali explained it, and just real briefly, okay? I'm just going to put it in a very simplistic way. TSMC did it smarter, longer. And so they were able to keep going on the way they built their chips, okay? When Intel hit a wall, they couldn't go through the wall. So Intel and these others are behind TSMC. So China, if China takes that, it would be a huge, huge mess for the entire world. Israel. The Daily Alert, which I get on an email, you can sign up for it if you want. It says, Israel should maintain a low profile in the current conflict. The U.S. as well has no interest in giving Putin the opportunity to turn the Middle East into another area of conflict against the West. So what does Bennett do? He goes up to talk to Putin. And now he's supposed to be the facilitator of peace up there. And if he comes down on the wrong side, what happens? Now, it took them, they were one of the last nations to go out there and say, this is wrong, this is war, and it's wrong. You know, the Russians shouldn't have done this. They drug their feet for a long time. And some other things are happening that the Israelis are behind on, and causing an issue between them and Russia. Now look at this. This is the Russian mission. We are concerned over Tel Aviv's announced plans for expanded settlement activity in the occupied Golan Heights. So you see this problem that persists between Russia and Israel. Okay? Now, having said that, I want to bring you to a thought that has come up several times over the last few months. And in fact, actually more than that. I think I told you that I've had a couple people, we've talked in this office, in my office, we've talked about, and they've given me prophecy, they've written down, they've given me what they think's going to happen. And what I do is I say, oh, that's interesting, and I'll take it and I'll set it aside, and when October comes up and it doesn't happen, I don't see their face. Or November, if it wasn't November, oh, I didn't mean November, I meant April, you know, those kind of things. Here's this, I've watched 2 series, the last couple months. These guys are excellent. I mean, they are so brilliant, the way they put their dates together, the way they get their information. They're getting it all out of the Bible, all of it. They believe in the salvation of Jesus Christ, and he's coming with the millennial kingdom, and all those things that you and I would say we believe in. However, they're wrong. This guy, this was one of the best videos I've ever seen, and the drawing and art on this, you would enjoy this, Joe. The art on this is fantastic. And he said that the tribulation, you see, the rapture was going to happen in, I think, November, last November. And the tribulation was going to start then. It didn't happen. All of his data is very interesting. It was based on the fig tree, which I love. We've talked about the fig tree, which is based on 70 to 80 years and all this other stuff. And again, it was so detailed. Most people go, this hurts my head. I went through it and I really, really liked it, but it was wrong. It was wrong. So now, I think he's on something else. I'll watch him a little bit, but just remember the other guy, Cloverdale, who said things were going to fall apart last October, November. That didn't happen. And again, I told you, I've sat in the office with people. Here's another one. This guy's name is Stephen Dexter. And this guy is brilliant. I'm telling you, this guy is smart. All the dates and all the timings and all the years and all the typologies in the Old Testament, he is fantastic. I'm not going to go into why he is wrong. I'm just going to give you one reason I know he's wrong. Not because, I'll leave the one Jesus said, no man knows the hour of the day. I'm going to take another one. He links up events that happened in the Old Testament, like the entry of Jesus Christ, and I think I did mention this, but the entry of Jesus Christ, the day of Palms, Palm Sunday, he comes into Jerusalem on a donkey. Do you think he's going to do that again? No. He already did it once. They rejected him. What does he come riding on next time? A white horse. So I think we've mentioned that, haven't we? Okay. It's a white horse. So that's right off the bat. I'm going, you got that one wrong. You're not reading what is the future prophecies. We're just trying to figure out a date using history. That's not all you need. You need everything. And by the way, I would be really careful about, I would not worry about the dates, to be honest with you. Jesus said in Matthew 24, when these things begin, look up. And so you're going to know the season, summer's coming. That's all you need to know. All right. Now, I'm going to finish with Isaiah. Listen, we're going to do about half of Isaiah in about 15 minutes. It'll be.
Well, it took us 6 years.
I want you to watch this. It's going to be very helpful, I think. For those of you who are interested in Ezekiel and the fall of Damascus and the tribulation, second coming of Jesus and all that stuff, which I think we all are. Chapter 1, God is angry. He calls out a judgment on Judah. All right? And if you want these, I can send them to you, okay? Gary, I can send this to you or whatever you want. In chapter 2, the first part of chapter 2, you have the restoration of Judah. It's a summary, okay? I'm angry at you, I love you, I'm calling you back. In the second part of chapter 2, you have what? The day of the Lord. So now, right off the bat, in chapter 1 and 2, you have the emphasis of God in the whole book of Isaiah. He's setting the foundation for the whole entire book. He's saying, I'm mad at my people, but I'm going to restore them. Watch. Let me show you how. The day of the Lord. You see? That's the summary of chapter 1 and 2. Okay? Then in chapter 3 and 5, there's the judgment of Judah. Again, because that's the emphasis of the book. And then in chapter 6, it's the call of Isaiah. Why the call of Isaiah there? Because God gave that vision to Isaiah. He said, this is what's happening with my people. This is what I'm going to do about it. It's going to be ugly, but I'm going to save them. That's it. Chapters 1 through 5. And then, it's like the question, well, do your people know about this? Like, who's going to tell them? And that's God saying, you. Who's going to go? You, Isaiah. So he calls Isaiah. So how does Isaiah start this statement? Now, again, we've got chapter 1 through 5, but how does Isaiah go about this, and how does God lay it on Isaiah and the nation of Israel, how this is going to be played out? Because it's about the judgment and restoration of Israel. okay? In particular, Judah, house of David. How is he going to do it? The first thing he talks about is the coming Assyrian invasion. Micah 5. I don't have to say any more about that, right? I'm going to bring somebody, they're going to whip on you. Then, in chapter 9 through 10, the coming Messiah and the judgment on Assyria. You see how they play? That typology there was God, is God telling his people and God telling his church exactly what is coming in the coming days. Chapter 11 is the millennial reign of Christ. So he comes, he whips on the Assyrian, and then it's the millennial reign. And chapter 12, his people are praising his name. Isn't that great? That's a great summary of Isaiah chapter 1 through 12. Okay, but how many chapters is Isaiah? 66. Okay, we're not going to go through 66. What happens next? It's a judgment on Babylon. Well, why Babylon? Well, that's the spiritual kingdom. All right? That's the spiritual. That is the demon. That is Satan. That's the dragon. Okay? So now you have the Assyrian, the Antichrist. You have the judgment on this guy. And look what happens here. The judgment on Babylon. Look who is next. Chapter 14, the fall of Lucifer. The fall of Babylon. And the fall of Assyria. You see how that plays in? Then, this is so important. The fall, the judgment on Moab, the fall of Damascus, which everybody is clamoring about. Why do we clamor about the fall of Damascus? Why do we focus on that? Because Damascus is still standing. And it's going to happen in the night. And now that Russia is there, everybody's in an uproar. But I have a question. What happened to Moab? There was 2 chapters of Moab. So now we understand a little bit more about Damascus. So we're going to focus on Damascus. And then chapter 18 is the judgment of Cush, Ethiopia and Sudan area. Then 19 is the judgment of Egypt. And the end of 19 is the judgment of Egypt and Assyria. Oh, I'm sorry. The raising up the blessings for Egypt and Assyria and Israel's blessings in chapter 19b. Then in chapter 20, you have judgment on Egypt and Cush again. Okay? And then chapter 21, the fall of Babylon. You have the judgment of Babylon in chapter 13. You have the fall of Babylon in 21 as bookends. And what do you have between? You've got these countries that are going to fall. All right? These towns and cities and countries. But we only want to worry about Damascus. And no, we don't. I'm going to show you something. Isaiah 17, an oracle concerning Damascus. Behold, Damascus will cease to be a city and will become a heap of ruins. So that's where we go, because that's never happened. Now, Mark Hitchcock would say, well, that has happened. This is a different Damascus. But most people, scholars will say Damascus has never fallen. All right? But watch. Verse 2, I don't hear anybody talking about verse 2. The cities of Aroer are deserted. They will be for flocks, which will lie down, and none will make them afraid. The fortress will disappear from Ephraim. Where's Ephraim? That's northern Israel. And the kingdom from Damascus and the remnant of Syria will be like the glory of the children of Israel, declares the Lord. Now the glory of the children of Israel was small. They were beat out, and there was just a few left. In that day, look, in verse 7, in that day, man will look to his maker. In the day of Damascus. When do you think this is happening? It begins to look more and more like the tribulation to me. Isaiah 15. So now, that's what happens to Damascus. Let's look at the countries real quick on either side of Damascus and Syria. An oracle concerning Moab, because Ar of Moab is laid waste in the night, just like Damascus, in the night, Moab is undone because Ker of Moab is laid waste in a night. Moab is undone. He has gone up to the temple and to Dibon, to the high places to weep, for the waters of Dibon are full of blood, for I will bring upon Dibon even more a lion for those of a Moab who escaped, for the remnant of the land. I want to show you a map. There is Damascus, his partner, Aurora, in Isaiah 17. There's Dibon. There's Ker of Moab, and Ar is right there. It's the same area as Isaiah 17. Isaiah 15 and Isaiah 17. Happens in the night, and it's in the same region. Chapter 16. Send the lamb to the ruler of the land from Salah by the way of desert to the mount of the daughter of Zion, like fleeing birds, like a scattered nest. So are the daughters of Moab. This is on Moab as well. There's 2 chapters on Moab. At the fords of Arnon, same area as I showed. The fords of Arnon is that main river that comes up. Give counsel, grant justice, make your shade like night at the height of noon. Shelter the outcast, do not reveal the fugitive. Shelter the outcast. That, I think, look at verse 4. Let the outcast of Moab sojourn among you, be a shelter to them from the destroyer. You know where Bozrah is? It's down south of that, southern Moab. That's where Bozrah is. When the oppressor is no more and destruction has ceased. It's southern section of Moab, could be northern section of Edom. Isaiah 18. A land of roaring wings that is beyond the river of Cush. Now we're in Africa. All you inhabitants of the world, you who dwell on the earth, when a signal is raised on the mountains, look. When a trumpet is blown here, for before the harvest, and I say, that's the summer harvest, maybe. When the blossom is over and the flower becomes a ripening grape, he cuts off the shoots with the pruning hooks and the spreading branches. He lops off it and clears away. They shall, all of them, be left to the birds of the prey of the mountains and to the beasts of the earth. This sounds like Revelation stuff to me. Chapter 19. An oracle concerning Egypt. Behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud. How does Jesus come back? On a swift cloud. You will see the Son of Man riding on the clouds. And the idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence. And the waters of the sea will be dried up, and the river will be dry and parched, and its canals will become foul, and the branches of Egypt's Nile will diminish and dry up. Isaiah 21, and behold, here comes riders, horsemen in pairs, and then he says, fallen, fallen is Babylon. The book ends. Babylon, Babylon, and these countries in between. But what we see when we look at Ezekiel 38 and 39, when we see these things happening in Damascus, we know that Christmas is near, right? In that day, the Egyptians will be like a woman and tremble with fear. Behold, the land that the Lord of hosts shakes over them, and the land of Judah will become a terror to the Egyptians. Everyone to whom it is mentioned will fear because of the purpose that the Lord of hosts has purposed against them. In that day there will be 5 cities in the land of Egypt that speak the language of Canaan and swear allegiance to the Lord of hosts. When is that? That's in the millennium. One of these will be called the city of destruction, and the Lord will strike Egypt, striking and healing them, and they will return to the Lord, and he will listen to their pleas for mercy. Look again what chapter it is. Isaiah 19, just next to Damascus. In that day there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria, and Assyria will come into Egypt, and Egypt into Syria, and the Egyptians will worship with the Assyrians. And they've never done that, by the way. In that day, Israel will be the third with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth, whom the Lord of hosts has blessed, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. Whenever you read a book, the whole book has to be in the context. Whenever you come across a verse that seems like it's odd or weird or strange or a chapter, the first thing you always have to do is put it in the context of the book. And this book is about the judgment of the last days and bringing Judah home to her king. Okay? And that is the concept here. I think that's it. I think I do have another little portion I'd like to show you next week on this idea. But remember this. And finally, the last thing is this, and I've already mentioned it, that when we see these things happening, that means the rapture has to be very close. It has to be close. Now, when I say close, people say, okay, come on, just give me a year. Just give me timing. And I think, I want to just say this. Libya is a complete disaster. Sudan is a complete disaster. Syria is not even close. Okay? The stands, all the stands are a complete mess. Turkey and Iran and Russia are friends, but there's frenemies. So that thing is, and now we've got a war in Ukraine that might last years. So, people say, well, do you have time? I have the time. We might have some time, but there might be a gap. We don't know what's going to happen here. So I'm suggesting that we have some things we have to see and endure. And the first thing I look at when I know that we're getting close is earthquake after earthquake after earthquake. When the earthquakes start happening in rapid succession, I'm going to be concerned. We'll see. But until then, we have the encouraging word, and there's less of us who do. Okay? So we have to march with that word. Your feet shod with the gospel of peace. And that peace is not to make people feel good. Somebody got real upset with me the other day because they were saying some things about, thinking good thoughts and some of these things. And I tried to, interject and help. And I don't know if I'm just not good at it or what. Grandma, you can tell me. But I tried to help and it wrote me off. I'm thinking, wait a minute, we need to be about the gospel that brings peace between me and God. What's the problem? The sin problem. And those who are outside of God's family are enemies of God. And the only way for peace is Colossians 1. He made peace through his blood. Without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins. Hebrews 9:22. So we need to bring that gospel, be shed with the gospel of peace our feet, and take the gospel to people who don't know it, and be brave enough to tell them the truth. Not everybody is God's friend. And so we'll just leave that. Let's pray. Lord, we worship you and we praise you and honor you. We thank you so much for your word and the message that you've given us. Thank you for these dear ones and the ones that listen, Lord God, that we will take your word with us. And hopefully and prayerfully by your Holy Spirit, you will change hearts. First of all, ours. Help ours to be tender toward people and helpful to other people. Help us to teach the truth in love. And that's difficult sometimes because truth hurts. But Lord, it is the truth. And so help us do that, we pray. Thank you for a church and a couple churches here in particular that do that and do it to the glory of God. In Jesus' name, amen.